May you have the roll, Mrs. Kendick?
Mr. Desai?
Here.
Mrs. Fryrick?
Here.
Dr. Hessen? Here. Mr. Robinson?
Here.
Mr. Sanders?
Here.
Mrs. San Martin? Here. Mrs. Schrader? Dr. Sullivan?
Here.
Mrs. Turner?
Here.
There are 8 members present and 1 absent this evening.
Thank you very much. This is a reminder for all of us to please silence your cell phones during the meeting. Thank you. And this brings us to item 4, first opportunity for public comment. Mr. Andy Ruth, Spring Garden Township.
Now it is. There we go. Perfect. Good evening, and thank you for the time this evening. At the last meeting, for which you will be approving the minutes tonight, there was a comment made about national politics emerging within these board meetings and within our district as a whole. Policy 109.1 regarding library resources is a good policy for the district, and for those who may not be aware, the board voted unanimously to approve it. However, the back and forth dialogue in previous meetings, as well as those minutes, still has not fully disclosed whether the book that was quote-unquote burned has been donated back to the Valley View Library. The older I get, the more I realize there are people who say they are going to help, and then there are people who take action to help. With that being said, I purchased a new copy of the book in question, and tonight I would like to donate that book back to the library at Valley View. Thank you.
Thank you. This brings us to item 5, Student Board Representative Report, but I do not see Ms. Enriquez with us, so we will table that for our next meeting. Item 6, Board President.
No official action was taken during this section. Discussion item for approval on May 27, 2025, appointment of to 2 voting delegates for the PA School Boards Association Delegate Assembly on Tuesday, October 21st, 2025. Anybody interested? Thank you, Mrs. Fryrick. Is there anyone who would like to join Mrs. Fryrick? Well, you still have time to think it over. Thank you. Item 7, administrative reports and discussion items. 7.1, superintendent's report. Dr. Brown.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. It's an absolute honor and privilege this evening to recognize a few retirees. They're coming off a little bit of a party next door as they were working their way in. And knowing a few of the ladies were really excited to come up and speak this evening. And they're fantastic elementary teachers, so I know they're well organized and they won't push or shove their way up to the microphone, but we'll give them all a chance to speak and share some comments. So behind me, you're going to see kind of a slideshow. We're going to highlight a few individuals, and this is always, kind of a mixed emotion time. We're celebrating an exceptional career on many individuals, but we're also celebrating the next steps in that journey to what they're going to pursue next. So just a few statistics to get us started this evening. As I shared, this is a remarkable group of retirees. Together, they're sharing combined 274 years of service to the York Suburban School District. So YS was fortunate enough to have 274 years, but that's not enough. They have together combined 337 years of service to public education. So that too deserves a round of applause. So these individuals certainly made bold impacts to our students, to our schools, to the community at large, and demonstrated a high level of commitment and professionalism, as well as a strong commitment to students, and that is always worth celebrating. So, as I shared, we had a little reception for the evening. They received a small symbol, a gift. It was created by our own high school technology and engineering class right down the hallway to help kind of leave a legacy that they have at their home. They have to be recognized for the time to come. So again, the retirees who are with us this evening, we're going to give you a moment. You're more than welcome to come up and share a few words of wisdom to the other adults and certainly to everyone else who's watching. So I'm going to start with Jay Barshinger. So Jay is a second grade teacher at Valley View and has served 30 years in public education and 25 years of service to the York Suburban School District. And Jay is with us this evening, so if she'd like to come up, she can, or she can just stand up and we can give her a round of applause. All right. So next you'll see Mrs. Stephanie Crumling. Steph is a 5th grade teacher at Indian Rock. She served at both Indian Rock and East York Elementary, and she has dedicated 25 years of service to the York Suburban School District. Next is Mrs. Jennifer Dillo, again service to both East York and Indian Rock. She's currently a 3rd grade teacher at Indian Rock Elementary. Jen has served 31 years in public education, with 28 of those years of service here at York Suburban. The next is a familiar face that you might see at high speeds moving down the streets of East York, but it's Mr. John Enders, who has been the head cross-country coach at York Suburban High School. John has dedicated 18 years of service to York Suburban. He wasn't here a moment ago, so maybe he would at least rise or want to come to the microphone, or did he sneak out? He's gone. Okay. Like I said, he's on the move. Next is Miss Katie Green. Katie's a science teacher at York Suburban High School, serving both the high school and the middle school during her time in Suburban. A total of 29 years of public education and 28 years at York Suburban. And I know Miss Green is here with us this evening. Maybe we can convince her to come up to the microphone, and she's bringing a friend. So good science collaborators always bring a partner, so here you go.
I do not do well with microphones. Thank you so much for a wonderful career. This has been my home, and I'm very honored to have served and been part of this community, and I'm so proud of it. Sad to leave. I'm leaving a little bit earlier than expected, but I just can't tell you enough. Thank you for everything. These children in this community are amazing, and so we are very blessed. But I did bring a spokesperson for you too. Yeah, they don't do well with microphones. This is Steph.
I'm addressing the school board tonight to honor Kate Green for her 28 years of service in the York Suburban School District. Kate and I started at the high school together 3 years ago, and while I can't speak much about her middle school career, I learned everything I need to know about who she is as an educator and a human being on the very first day I saw her with students at the high school. While in the hallway welcoming the students in, I watched as student after student entered the building, kids from every grade, and light up the moment they saw her. Their faces absolutely glowed, and without hesitation, most ran over to get a hug. And not just 1 or 2 students, dozens, and it continued all day long. Mrs. Green is a master educator in every sense of the word. When she arrived at the high school just 1 week before the school year began, she was handed a course with no curriculum, no materials, no roadmap, just another teacher's idea. But where others might have seen chaos, Kate saw opportunity. She immediately got to work designing a class not from a textbook, but from a deep understanding of the students in front of her. She built the course around their needs, their interests, and their potential, crafting lessons with intention, creativity, and care. Through long hours, unwavering dedication, and a fierce commitment to her students, she transformed that empty shell of a course into a meaningful, engaging, and successful learning experience. It wasn't just teaching, it was artistry, fueled by heart and guided by purpose. Mrs. Green brought her signature magic to the EMT course she created, transforming what could have been a dry, adult-style certification program into a dynamic, student-centered experience that still met rigorous professional standards. Drawing on her deep connections in the community and her own outside knowledge of the field, Kate built a program that not only prepared students for a real-world emergency response, but did so in a way that honored how they learned best. She refused to simply lecture and test, spending long hours after school and on weekends to create active hands-on learning, real-life scenarios, and meaningful engagement. Thanks to her vision, persistence, and refusal to settle for good enough, students didn't just pass the course, they leave it confident, capable, and inspired. The success of the EMT program is a direct reflection of Kate's belief that even the most serious content can be taught with heart, purpose, and joy. Mrs. Green isn't just a teacher to these kids. She is a safe place, a source of comfort, encouragement, and fun. She makes them feel seen, she makes them feel important, she makes them feel loved. So, the reason they love her so much is simple. She loved them first, deeply, consistently, fiercely. And now as she steps into retirement, I hope she knows the legacy she leaves behind is in the hearts of every student who felt lucky enough to be one of hers. Thank you.
Thank you. As you shared, excitement and emotion all time. The next individual we're going to celebrate this evening is Dr. Gregory Gully. So Dr. Gully was a principal at Indian Rock Elementary as well as a teacher here at Indian Rock many years ago. And he served 32 years in public education with 21 years dedicated to the York Suburban School District. Sue Herman, who I see is with us this evening as well. Sue was a reading specialist at Valley View Elementary, and she served 30 years in public education and 18 years dedicated to York Suburban. Are we standing or are we? Okay. And Sue has been enjoying a lot of those retirement in these early months, so we wish her well. Cheryl Johnson is also back there this evening. Second grade teacher at Valley View Elementary School. Cheryl has 23 years, and she also spent some time in East York when we first started. In public education and dedicated 22 years at York Suburban School District. So, would you like her mic? Okay, we're going to and I will try. Next on our list is Myra Lopez. She's a custodian here at the York Suburban High School, and Myra has dedicated 3 years of service to the York Suburban School District. Carla Lowe, who's held multiple positions here at York Suburban, is currently a 5th grade teacher at East York Elementary, with dedicated 23 years of service to York Suburban School District. Theodore Mann, known by Teddy, is a custodian at Indian Rock Elementary, and Teddy has dedicated 10 years of service to York Suburban and well loved by the children at Indian Rock Elementary School. And we have another guest joining us this evening, Miss Lori Meckley. Lori is a 1st grade teacher at Valley View with 26 years in public education and 16 years at York Suburban. We're getting away. And Mrs. Stephanie Peterson is also with us this evening. I think. She snuck out the side. Her closing role was the administrative assistant for athletics. Stephanie has dedicated 25 years at York Suburban, so we wish her well. And lastly, Ms. Frau Carol Shearer is a German teacher at York Suburban High School and also at the middle school for much of her career, as well as some EL time. Carol has served 37 years in public education and dedicated 17 years at York Suburban. So we thank our retirees. We wish them well. The impact they have, yes. The impact lasts forever. So we appreciate you very much. Thank you. The next item that I have this evening is I did ask Dr. Ellis to join us. As you know, we've been spending some time talking about the intermediate school and getting some updates in the high school, but we thought it'd be a good opportunity to kind of revisit the plan program and the work that we've been doing regarding the high school. So Dr. Ellis and his team have been very busy. This goes back to the work that the board had engaged in 23 and 24, 22, 23, 24, with the work that we were doing to organize the plan program. In particular, as that work and that process unfolded, we're really focused on making sure that we were maximizing the support of the renovation projects to meet the needs of the planned program at the high school, really with that focus on our shared spaces and what does that mean with the experiences of the facilities, how the students interact with the facilities, and how the teachers can use that with their modern pedagogy. So lots to talk about, but I'm going to kind of turn it over to Dr. Ellis. He's going to walk us through a little bit of the history of the why, the work that's being done, the work he's doing with the high school staff about the planned program at the high school.
Thank you, Dr. Krauser. Thank you, board members, for giving me an opportunity to speak a little bit about the future of our high school. It is exciting to think about where we're headed. Obviously, there's a lot of conversation about the physical building, and that's certainly a consideration we need to talk about, but even more so of how high schools in general are evolving and how our high school needs to evolve to meet the current needs of our students. And I have a number of pieces that I'd like to share with you about that piece. A couple bullet points and just to preview the various topics that I want to share here with you. First of all, I'll talk a little bit about what high school age students in our district are currently doing. I want to talk about the complexity of the student choice to go to college. For many years, it was just assumed that's the right thing to do for the majority of the students, and it probably is in many cases, but it is a more complex choice now than it was 15, 20, 30 years ago when many of us were making that decision. We'll talk a little bit about that and how that impacts our students. Talking about the structures and how we're trying as a high school to evolve to support the diverse needs of our students. And then certainly transitioning into the facility and how is the facility impacting what our teachers are able to do with our students, and to look a little bit about the concepts that we're talking about with the renovation. And finally, the idea that this process will never be finished. Even if a new building is built, we will continue to evolve our high school programming. So how are we doing that? And talk a little bit about some of the additional data that we're going to. So the first piece I wanted to share is a little bit of a reality of where our York suburban residents are right now. So by that number we have, and please forgive me, the numbers change daily, so this is probably off by about a week from some of the other enrollment figures you have. But we currently have 1,052 high school age York suburban residents that are attending a public school at this time. As you can see, only 819 are actually attending our high school. 233 are choosing to go elsewhere at this point. Or they've gone through, and the orange at the very bottom have actually graduated already during this course of the year. But as you can see, even within the 819 students that we have here at the high school, 40 of them are on a non-traditional path. They're doing something that is unusual or that is not a typical go to school 7 periods a day type of approach. 3 are at full-time at York County School of Technology, 9 are part-time. They're spending their afternoons there. We had 15 students, Mrs. Green just left, but 15 students were spending a quarter or a third of their day just learning to be EMTs. We have 1 student this year is going full-time to college, and we have 11 that I would classify as part-time college students, meaning they're spending at least half of their day in college courses as opposed to here. In addition to that, for those students that are completely outside our high school, you can see the breakdown there. 75 are going to York Tech's full program, 58 are attending the cyber school that we're affiliated with Lincoln Edge, 9 are going to the alternative school at York Adams Academy to try to accelerate their learning, and 63 are going to one of our non-affiliated cyber charters. And as I said, a poise of pride, and certainly something that is very different about school now. 28 of our students have already graduated. They've chosen to go to York Adams Academy or Lincoln Edge, or even just to try to finish up their first semester here with us to try to graduate. So it's a very different approach to what we've always done. And over there on the left, so basically 25%, a quarter of our students are doing something that's a non-traditional high school experience. And how are we evolving to make sure we meet those needs? So continuing on, just to look a little bit, and this is piggybacking, many of you were on the board 2 years ago when I did a presentation to kick some of this conversation off in terms of the trends of where our students are. As you can see, this looks at what our students are choosing to do immediately after high school in regards to college. Are they going off to college? And as you can see, it was a relatively steady number over the first up to about 2020. And certainly we all recognize COVID changed and impacted those things. You can see a downward trend pretty significantly since then in terms of the interest of our students in terms of going off to college. So we were consistently in around the 70%. Those recent 2 classes were approximately a little over 50% of our students chose to go to those institutions. I don't believe that's a permanent trend. I do believe that will begin to rebound as we move a little bit further from COVID, but I don't expect that we'll ever go back to that 70% level because students are truly exploring some of the other choices that they have available to them. With that in mind, also looking, one of the key things and one of the key points that we continue to talk about, we are an outstanding academic institution. It always has been. It's a source of pride. It's why I wanted to come here and was fortunate to be hired here, and it's why I want to continue to work with everyone. But even within that piece, we have never had all of our students graduating from college. A huge portion of our population they may go to college, but they still may not ultimately graduate. We've always been in that sort of 60% range in terms of the percentage of our students that are actually going off and choosing to finish up their college degree. So there is that population of 40% or so of our students that we need to make sure we're doing the right things for. Just to explain a little bit on this graph, obviously the classes on the far right-hand side have not finished. We use a 6-year completion rate for college visas. So those are projected values that I did based upon what our current trends are, how many of the students were retained from year to year to year to look at that piece. And also on the left-hand side, there's a gap. We simply didn't subscribe to the service that would have given us that information during that time frame. So unfortunately, we can't know exactly what happened with those classes from the early 2010s, but you can still see a general trend of that piece. It's still that idea that about 60% of our students are going to graduate from college. How are we going to support that other group? One of the nice things that I'm proud of at this point, and I hope this trend continues, is we believe we may be getting the right population off to college. This next slide looks at how many students are being retained from year 1 to year 2. And really in a college world, if a student comes back for their sophomore year, I see our college professor nodding her head. If they come back for year 2, they're sticking it out. And that's the idea here. So while we have had less students going off to college over the last number of classes, we have more students that are staying for year 2, suggesting that they probably made the right choice and we were giving them good advice in terms of that particular piece. So, I mean, that's a look at the current trends of our college students. We're going to continue to look at this as we get more National Clearinghouse data to make sure we're staying on top of it and involved. But as we think a little bit about the college choices facing our school, this is very technical, forgive me. There are a number of pieces in terms of college that our families are dealing with right now. Our parents in terms of the conversations with their children, as well as the other pieces that are going on. Certainly the cost of college is sticker shock. I mean, I think back to how big the number was when I chose to go, and now it's about 4 times that amount. I'm like, how is that possible? But our families are definitely feeling that in terms of what they're trying to put away for their students in the future. It's also the piece that, another element of, while there is sticker shock, the sticker shock seemed to drive down attendance for a little while, but most researchers are now saying that was as much COVID related as anything else. Attendance is starting to rebound in spite of that sticker shock across the country. But also we know a lot about student debt. It certainly has a lot of headlines and has for many, 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 many years. These are just figures from a research study in terms of the amount of debt that students will have to carry coming out on average. So those are factors that families are trying to grapple with as to whether or not college is the right choice. Additional realities, we have to be conscious of what is happening with higher levels of institute or higher education pieces. We know that the state system consolidated into fewer institutions, so we're having contraction. Penn State is talking about contracting many of its branch campuses, and just looking at statistics over that decade, about 15% of schools no longer exist, or the total number of degree-granting institutions dropped pretty significantly in that period of time. So there are less college options for our students to attend, and colleges are struggling across our country. So that is also realities facing our kids. Some of our students have gone to institutions that are not going to be able to finish because they're closing their door and saying you're going to have to find something else out for your sophomore or junior year. Our college isn't going to exist. So that's giving some families pause as to whether or not they wish to attend. Other considerations that we think of in terms of high school, but also for our families, is what is the best way for employment. And this is a projection done by a Georgetown study that 72% of jobs will require some type of post-secondary education, 42% will require a bachelor's degree. So there are quite a lot of options for students to pursue employment and further study without going through a 4-year program. And as a school, we have to look and reflect, are we doing the right things for that 30% of students that are going to fall into that post-secondary path without a pure 4-year degree? We also have to look very frankly at the students. Some students are not motivated to go off to college. Others are very motivated to go. Those are factors that each individual parent has to try to grapple with. The student truly does not want to go off to college writing out a $30,000 check for them is probably not the best choice that first year, even it might be the best thing for them in the long run. And there's other financial factors that families are starting to factor in. More and more employers are willing to pay for that bachelor's degree. So students that start working, they can go off and not have have tuition reimbursement, so they don't have the same occurrence. Certainly the GI Bill has been around for a long time, and we've had many of our students take advantage of that, either because of their parents or because of that themselves. And also, students are figuring out, if I don't go off to college, I have a 4-year head start in terms of making money by actually going out and getting a job and maybe taking classes on the side. So these are all factors that students are starting to think about as they go into the college choice. And it brings up this example. This is just an example of a theoretical child, very good with their hands, really enjoys building things, really enjoys working on pieces, always thought he or she may want to be an engineer, but also just because of the aptitudes and the interests, could also be a very successful HVAC technician. And certainly if any of us have had HVAC bills recently, we certainly recognize that will continue to be a career that's successful. Here's a scenario, and looking at what that child's life could be like going to age 30. Obviously the engineer is going to make more money when he comes out of college. That's his professional job, that's the case. The HVAC tech is going to start at a much lower rate. Now they try to project out how much salary increases every year and such, just to try to keep the numbers simple. The reality is, by getting that head start, the lifetime earnings of the HVAC tech at that age 30 is very similar to what it would be for the engineer. But the HVAC tech didn't spend $120,000 for their education. They only spent $15,000. Similarly, they don't have any college loans right now. And if you think about what happened with that money that wasn't spent on the degree, they invested it or did other things with it. You can see in this case, and because the employer, the HVAC company, was willing to solve potential in that student, paid for the college degree, where would you rather be at age 30 in these two scenarios? And that's a question that some of our students are starting to look at and are grappling with. And by no means am I saying is college the wrong choice. Please don't misunderstand me in that. It is very much the right choice for many of our students. My point in sharing this is it's a much more complicated decision and something a lot more consideration should be given to various opportunities. And then us as a school, how are we making sure that we're addressing those pieces and make sure that our kids are properly prepared for what they need to do when they get to their choice, whatever it happens to be, but then also making sure we're providing them with information that helps them make that choice and make the appropriate one so they can be successful going on. So that is really sort of the dilemma that we're facing in our school in terms of how do we evolve. When I came here, certainly it was a college for all mentality. I believe that as a population is changing. I believe the ideas of society have changed as well as our community. But it is something that we continue to look and grapple with, and how are we able to support our students in those pieces. So the way we've tried to approach it, and have for many years, but we're trying to double down on it and try to enhance it, is to look at really sort of 3 groups of students as they come through the high school. We'll have our traditional academic students, the ones that are going to go off to our higher levels of the colleges and universities. We want to give them a very rigorous academic program. We want to give them the opportunity to do 10, 15 AP courses, to do dual enrollment courses at York College or Penn State or wherever that happens to be. We want to make sure they're prepared for that highly selective university if they wish to do it. At the same time, giving them enough information, exposure to career interests that they're making an informed choice of their major to make sure that they're not wasting time. But on the other end of the spectrum, there are clearly those students that come into the high school recognizing that they don't want to go to college. It's not their mindset. So how are we helping them to truly prepare? And we call that the workforce enlistment pathway. What are we doing for those students? How do the academics in those classes for those students change to try to help prepare them for working at a job at age 18 or going into a trade at age 18? Or going into a post-secondary school that's not a 4-year college, and what does that look differently? At the same time, giving those students real immersive career experiences, helping them to truly experience what they might want to do in the future, so when they take that first job, they're going to have a leg up because they're making the right choice for them. It's the idea of being able to offer credentials and certifications to our students. Students that are going off into a construction or manufacturing have an OSHA certification. We're going into hospitality, have a CervC. Or going into some kind of medical career might have various certifications such as Stop the Bleed and CPR, and give them a leg up when they go to get a job by having that on their resume. And looking at ways that the students are getting off of our campus to to have all of those experiences through programs like YCal Presents for our students. And of course, while we have those two groups on either end of the spectrum, we also have that group in the middle that we have to be conscious of. These are the ones that truly have a choice. They're not necessarily guaranteed to be college bound. It might not be their interest, it might not be what's best for them. But they also aren't necessarily definitely going into a workforce enlistment kind of opportunity. So how are we preparing them? And what are we building in the middle with them to make sure that they have that college preparation, that if they do wish to go off to college, they're prepared to write their essays freshman year, they're prepared to be successful in their math and science courses and so on and so forth. But then they're also, while they're in high school, getting the opportunities and experiences to be able to make that a more informed choice, to decide whether they want to be an HVAC tech or whether they want to go and be an engineer by having all those various experiences. So trying to really zoom in on how we offer these experiences to students to help enhance their high school experience, to make it more engaging for them, but also to help them make a more informed choice where we go. In addition to the idea of the pathways, questions that we have to continue to ask ourselves is some of the things that we've just taken granted for in our institution for many, many years. And how is that reflecting and how is that endorsing or not endorsing some of these options for students? Certainly we look at what we require of students for graduation. The graduation scheme of 4 English, 3 Math, 3 Science, 3 Social Studies was born out in the 1940s in the school code. It no longer exists in the school code. The only thing students must pass in high school is now financial literacy, ironically. And they must take 3 courses that correspond to biology, algebra 1, and English literature because those are keystone courses. They don't have to take any other courses by the state of Pennsylvania designation. So are we really looking at those requirements and we're using them tactfully to help students make good choices as opposed to just getting a checklist that arbitrarily would be accepted by a college even if they're not college bound? Also looking how we recognize students. Certainly we do a lot to recognize students academically. It was a pleasure the last 2 weeks to be able to have the ceremonies as we celebrate our accomplishments of our seniors as well as our underclassmen academically, but are we doing enough to recognize students that may be very successful but may not fit into that traditional academic mold? So what are we doing for them? And then also just looking at how our systems contribute to whether or not we're directing students to the right places. So those are the considerations and conversations I want to continually have with our leadership in the building to look at different ways to try to build out our program. So that's how we're trying to approach this from a philosophical standpoint in terms of supporting our students, but then also certainly there's a consideration of the physical building and how it's built. Sure.
Oh, sorry to get into physical building. Are students, when you're looking at the college bound trends, are they applying and choosing not to go, or are they not applying at all?
I would have to go back and look at a different data source for that particular piece. The data that is there is reflected by the National Clearinghouse, which is looking at the students on campus and reporting it that way. Certainly we do have records of what students, how many have applied. I believe most that are applying are choosing to go, other than some that may apply to a 2-year college and decide that's not right for them. But if a student's taking the time to apply to a 4-year college, they're generally going to that 4-year college.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you that institutions are closing across the nation, but not just entire institutions, programs are closing. So students might be interested in studying the arts or philosophy or something of that nature, and the school they wanted to go to is not offering that program any longer. So that is something else to think about. And having come across many kids from many school districts in York County, the York suburban kids are always, I can pick them out, they're always top notch, they're always well prepared, without much like scaffolding backgrounds. They always know what they're doing, they know what the expectations are, and they're just a pleasure to have back.
I appreciate you saying that. That's the best endorsement of our academic program, and credit to the teachers for all the work they've done and what they've built over the years for that purpose. And certainly, no matter how much time we put into the career world, we want to ensure that that kind of academic preparation continues to be a key part of how we approach our program. So talk a little bit about the physical building. We come in and we look at how is our building able to support our teachers and what they're trying to do now, as well as that evolution into the future. As you're aware, our building is old. It was built in the 1950s. The science wing was added in the 60s, and our last mechanical updates were in 1997. So that's just a little background of where we are with it. I've certainly lived this building for 13 years, and I've talked with the teachers regularly about it, as well as some other places. There are challenges that our current facility presents to our teachers that, while they make it work and they do a great job with what is given to them, there are limitations on how great of a job that they could potentially do beyond just the experiences they're having. We do have many small classrooms in our core areas. This limits the overall class size. It also limits the ability to do some small group instructional strategies when you have 24 or 25 students in some of our small classrooms. We still have old furniture. We have talked about trying to replace that over the last decade, but there was always an eye towards eventually doing a renovation, so we haven't done that, but we're still working with the same type of desks and the same type of environment that I would have had as a student in the 1990s. Our science labs, as we said, were built in the 60s. A lot has evolved in science since the 1960s. They are small, they are crowded, and the equipment generally is inflexible. It doesn't give teachers a whole lot of opportunity for those pieces. Our career and elective areas are also small and crowded. They were built in the 50s. I've oftentimes joked about Mr. Gerling's drill press that still existed up until 2 years ago. And he was the first graduating class from here. So we have a foods area that was very much designed for homemakers back in the 1950s and 60s, where people were learning how to run a home as opposed to learning how to be a chef or some of the culinary options. Our fitness facilities, while they have been addressed in the time I was here, the fitness room was added in 2015, but it is very tight. It's borderline safe in terms of it. When we have a large team or a large phys ed class, it is very crowded and it has limited equipment. Our library and media center is inefficient for modern library needs. Again, it was updated in the 60s with the first major renovation. There's a lot of unused space within it that could be repurposed and be much more intentional. And this one came very much to light here over the last couple of weeks as a good reminder. We don't have an isolated area for testing. Since so much testing is now done in our school, both the SATs are taken multiple times a year, the PSATs are taken multiple times a year. We've spent the last 2 weeks in AP testing. There is no quiet environment for our students to be able to take the test. They have a classroom in the building and students are walking by continuously. Certainly most of our students are polite and they're respectful to that end, but it does create some challenges for the purpose of the students doing as well as they possibly could. I put a number of slides here. I know you have access to this just right from the teacher's words. And I'm not going to try to read this. We have a 30, 45 minutes of me just reading through it. But the teachers are very passionate about what they would be able to do if they have additional options. I like some of the first quotes there in terms of when it comes to regular classes, space is tight in my room when there are 20 plus students. We've talked about how the lack of space and furniture makes it harder to run activities like stations that could be beneficial to our students. I also have some students request to work in the hallway on group projects because of those space constraints, and I always feel bad about sending them out to work on the floor. This is coming from a teacher, and it's one of my, as I walk around the building, inevitably there are always half dozen of students outside of classrooms when teachers are doing these things, just sitting on the floor and working. We can do better for them. And you can see some other examples as you page through it. This will become part of the public record that anyone in the audience also will be able to look at some of these comments that we have and some of the challenges they're facing. So beyond just what's happening in our classrooms and the challenges that are faced by the teachers, there's also additional challenges that just the infrastructure of the building makes for our operation as a school. We certainly have deteriorated mechanicals. Mrs. Thompson, is a daily task for her to keep the building operating and running in a consistent way. Many of you are aware we had issues with the sewer system a couple times in the last month, and we had to shut down portions of the building at various pieces. Our HVAC system struggles. To that end, as I was saying about AP testing last week, because of the current status of our HVAC, and because it was very muggy last week with all of the rain, we had AP testing in room 160, our large group room, all day long last Thursday. We ran the dehumidifier up until basically the test started. We shut it down just because it was loud and noisy. Basically, then turned it back on for the 10-minute break in the middle of the test as well as at lunch. But again, toggling that on and off, just trying to maintain the humidity level in a reasonable place for our students to be able to take the test in reasonable comfort. Certainly, you recognize the inadequate public lobby and cafeteria bathrooms. Anyone that has come to a board meeting and used the bathrooms, you recognize that's what our students also will go to, and I'll have pictures of those. Our faculty areas have not been addressed to modernize them, to make them something that we would recruit teachers to really, for whether it's for work or lunch, they still look very much like they did when they were first put in place in the 50s. We struggle as education has changed and there are more and more individuals that are working out of offices to serve our students. We don't have enough spaces for conferences and office spaces in our current structure. We only have 10 traditional offices and 1 conference room. And we've had to repurpose closets, conference and small rooms, seating areas, the TV studio, the nurses' suites, and shared spaces for some of those functions. And certainly building security. While we have tried to keep up with the times with security needs, everything has been retrofitted as opposed to being able to intentionally plan to make sure our students have the best security options that are available. So as I talk a little bit about the needs, just to speak to that specifically, I alluded to the fact that we have 10 office spaces. This is just a list of 14 employees in the high school that would, in theory, should have an office space of their own. In addition to that, we also have many people coming in from the outside. Our LIU staff come in to work with students. We have our behavioral health specialists that come in to work with students. We have our SAP program that comes in to work. And again, those are all additional people that would need spaces when they come into our building. We also have more instances where students just need a confidential space. They may have a meeting with their psychologist or with their mental health person. We just simply try to reserve a space for them to have that meeting during the school day so it's facilitated. So that inefficiency makes it very difficult to operate because we're always trying to jump around and find other places to be able to set people up for meetings. At the same time, as I said, our students are sitting on the floor outside of classrooms, or when our special education teachers need to pull a group of students out of the room, they need to find something far away in the building as opposed to having a convenient small space that they could potentially work from. If we have multiple IEP meetings at any one time, typically we have trouble trying to find spaces. Sometimes we just have to use a traditional classroom for that purpose, which is fine until the bell rings and the next group of students is coming in. So that's one of the things that has really set us back or held us back in terms of the efficiency and operation of our building. And again, there are some additional comments from teachers to that end about our building that you can look at from the operational standpoint. As I alluded to, just some of the pieces, and I'll move into additional slides that talk about what other places have in place. These are some of the public and teacher spaces that we're working from. In the top left-hand corner, that is our new conference room that was built in the 2015 renovation. It is perfectly sized for about 8 people, but it is not oversized. It's still a relatively crowded environment, but that is our only professional conference room space that we have in the building. Immediate below that is our TV studio. As many of you are aware, our TV studio program ended a number of years ago due to lack of interest, so we've tried to retrofit that as a conference room. So basically we have the curtains pulled. That's currently set up as an AP testing room, just for a small group environment. But that's where many of our families are going right now for their IEP meetings or for meetings with counselors or otherwise. Across the top, the second picture to the left, that is our faculty room. That is where our teachers eat lunch. It does have a new floor a number of years ago that was put in. But well in the far back is the 1950s kitchenette that is still there, as well as a microwave that is just sitting off on the counter. And then we're using old library furniture for teachers to sit on and eat. On the right-hand side are the lobby bathrooms. This is what supports our families and our community members when they come in to see a basketball game or to see the play or a concert. It is limited in terms of the number of facilities that are there. It's also old and is not the most appealing place for that purpose. Down below, on the second picture on the left, that's a faculty restroom. Again, perfectly functional, it works, but is that the most appealing thing for our faculty members to want to use if necessary? And then on the far right-hand side, those two pictures, many are familiar with, those are the bathrooms that are accessible from our back hallway. That is what is used for board meetings, that is what is used for banquets when they're in here, that is what is used by our students during the lunchtime. And unfortunately, because of the limited number of stalls that are available, we have a backup on the line because we don't want students wandering all over our building to go to other bathrooms. So it is certainly something that impacts the efficiency and operation of our building. So where do we go from here? So one of the pieces has been great working with Mr. Wentz and Crabtree Rubal just to look at what we could potentially do with our building and some theoretical options to that end. This is the latest concept of what we could potentially do with our high school to try to address some of those pieces. We're not looking at major renovations here. We're looking at major renovations to the existing structure. We're not looking at a whole lot of new building. Essentially what this creates is on the left-hand side, essentially tears down the current science wing, and replaces it with 3 facilities. A 2-story science wing, which is attached to the end of what is currently our English hallway, a large group instruction area that could serve as a boardroom, could serve for AP testing, could serve some different purposes, and then also the natatorium that we have been speaking about in terms of replacing what currently exists. And then basically it retrofits everything else back into the current picture by moving around some of our elective areas and some purposes or some different opportunities to take advantage of space, to make the kitchen and the cafeteria a little bit larger and more productive, to make our day run a little bit more efficiently, and sliding some of those pieces. But you're not seeing major changes. Most of our construction is going to stay in the same general way it is, just with renovated spaces that are more conducive to what our students need. In addition, the second floor mirrors what currently is on the first floor. We would simply have a 2-story science wing coming off the end of what is currently our English and math wing, over there on the left-hand side of that particular picture. Otherwise, most of the classrooms staying the same, with the idea that potentially taking some of those small rooms and making some of the office spaces and pull-out spaces that we've talked about, or combining a couple of small rooms into a larger classroom space throughout the facility. So really what we're looking at when we try to do the renovation is to update a number of pieces with our building. Certainly you get the updated mechanicals. You're well aware we need to do that if they haven't been addressed since 1997. They're beyond their life expectancy, and we're just on borrowed time with that. So making sure we bring the facility up from a mechanical standpoint to modern times. Looking at addressing the science and STEM classrooms by renovating or basically tearing down the existing ones and building modern ones that are better suited for our students. Updating our career spaces by making them more intentional to the needs of a current modern day. Things such as applied engineering as opposed to shop, things such as culinary experiences as opposed to homemaking experiences. Upgrading our art facilities to better suit the needs of the art students. Looking at our classroom environments, the traditional academic classrooms, and bringing them in to modernize them, to increase some of the space, as well as bringing flexible furniture that's more conducive to the type of experiences that students want to have with their teachers, as well as what the teachers want to direct them for. Looking at operational efficiencies by taking better advantage of our spaces, making them more intentional, bringing our building up to code in terms of building security, truly making it so that it's that our building is secure at all points of the day as well as after hours, making sure we have a good egress for fire, evacuation, all those pieces that come into it. And also looking at accessibility. One of the major challenges that our building faces is the accessibility piece. As most of you are aware, the elevator sits just between the English wing and our science classroom. So our students, unfortunately, for whatever reason, we have way too many students that blow out their knees, sprain their ankles, they're on carts, they're on wheelchairs, they're on crutches or otherwise. I think there's 4 girls right now in knee braces that had recent surgery. Unfortunately, because of where our elevator is currently stationed, those students sometimes have to walk 150 yards just to get to the elevator, to go up or down, and then turn around and walk back to almost the exact same point of the building, just on the other, just above or below them. It's not conducive to them. It keeps them out of class. It also is simply, it's just unfortunate that we're asking our students to do that. Our elevator also is very small. It does not give a whole lot of opportunity to move furniture and to do some of those other pieces, which further undermines the efficiency of our building and the efficiency of our storage options. So bringing that in appropriately, putting it somewhere in the building will improve the accessibility. There are also some other pieces just bringing up to code in terms of accessibility for our handicapped citizens if they're happening. So those are the overall pieces that we want to look at doing with the building. And on the next number of slides, I show you examples of what other neighboring schools are doing for their children as they go through the renovations. So this first slide, Susquehannock just recently finished their project. Just comparing a little bit, this is an example of their band room. And then I put a picture below of our band room. Similarly, then also a science laboratory with the same amount of seating. Looking at the space that they have for 24 seats, whereas the seats there, that's actually ironically Mrs. Green's room. There on the bottom right-hand side where we taught EMT out. So you can see the simple space that's being provided with some of these renovations, of whether it's how it can be conducive and supportive of the music program as well as the science program. The next one is Dover High School. Certainly also a brand new building. I believe it's opened about 4 years ago. Is that Yep, that opened 4 years ago. Just comparing what their students have options there in terms of their student commons area, where their students can congregate and work on activities, or like our senior lounge exists, whereas below is our senior lounge that our students have an opportunity to participate in. On the right-hand side is their wood shop and their applied engineering area compared to ours, as well as the additional space, the opportunities, more safe environment for the students to work in, as well as more space to work on their projects. This is really sticky, literally. Manheim Township Middle School, I can show it to you, it is quite sticky. I'm not sure what it's all over the piece. Manheim Township Middle School opened a couple of years ago. That was another opportunity and revision. You can see an example of a modern classroom that they built for the same number of seats that we have there in that picture that I provide you below, which happens to be a geometry classroom or a math classroom for us. On the right-hand side is their foods area. You see the major difference in terms of obviously the modern components as opposed to our cabinetry that we have, as well as just stainless steel versus just white, and the benefits that come with the cleanliness of that particular piece. But the major difference that they provided, they put a classroom within the space, as opposed to our classroom is actually separated from the space. So a teacher cannot both have demonstrations and activities going on at the same time any kind of classroom demonstration is happening, because there's a physical wall that separates the two facilities. So as an example of what the Manheim Township has done, in this case for their middle school students. State College certainly is a much bigger school than ours, so the size of things will be a little bit different. You can see their fitness center, obviously they have a much bigger program, so we would not have anything nearly that large. But you see the additional space that they have for their equipment and for their student athletes, as well as their physical education students compared to our fitness center. And on the right-hand side is another example of a science lab. That science lab has the same number of seats as our science labs do, but that is Mrs. Gensel's classroom in the bottom right-hand corner. We only have lab table seating there in the middle for 16 of the 24 students. The other 8 students sit at lab tables around the perimeter of the room on stools, as opposed to sitting in traditional chairs for that purpose. So that's an example, again, of another recently opened school. Manheim Central also recently completed a renovation. There's an example of their wood shop. I put another picture of the second half of our woods area, where basically there's a large wall separating the two spaces, which makes it difficult for supervision. The teacher sort of has to focus on one side of the room or the other, or have to be willing to have students working on saws and so forth without actually watching them do it, which obviously is not a good case. On the right-hand side is, again, a modern classroom that they built at Manheim Central. The same amount of seating that there are 2 English classrooms that I put pictures of below, just in terms of the space, the ability for people to move around the room, the ability to do collaborative grouping with the potential furniture that they have. In this last slide here, in terms of pictures, I don't have anything to compare to, because these are spaces that don't exist in our high school in any form. Susquehannock built a commercial kitchen for their students to truly have hospitality experiences. They have opportunities to truly, as opposed to just doing a single oven or a single range kind of piece, they're looking at the same kind of equipment that they'll do if they want to be a chef or going into different culinary arts and hospitality kinds of pieces. On the right-hand side, and I think back to, I alluded to, one of the small classrooms that Katie Green taught EMT out of with Mr. Gunji. This is what State College offers their students for medical study. As you can see over on the right-hand side, there are actually a number of beds, hospital beds with mannequins that the students can have experiences with, a much larger space to be able to spread out and work in. So they teach a number of different medicine classes out of that. And certainly knowing that medicine, both nursing as well as doctors, has been a very popular major for many of our students and future interest. Developing programs around medicine like we have done with EMT is certainly something we're very interested in doing. But again, the huge contrast of what a State College student gets to experience in terms of that space compared to our students that are working within a small science classroom or doing out in the hallway to do something for their demonstrations. So that's an overall look in terms of examples of what other schools are doing and the things that we would hope to be able to incorporate into our building. But as I said, this process is not by any means close to done. It's a constant process of gathering more data, looking at how that's going to be reflected both in the physical building, but how our program continues to evolve. These are just a few of the different data points that we're going to be looking at over the next year to help inform and to continue the work that we're doing right now. All of our high school students are going to be doing a survey in the middle of May. I guess it already is the middle of May. They're going to be doing it next week just to gather feedback from them, both about how the building is operating, how the programming is supporting their interests. We're going to do analysis of the extracurricular participation and how does that need to be addressed within our building this coming summer. We designed an alumni survey, so all the alumni of our building or of our school that we have access to in terms of cell phone numbers or emails are going to get an opportunity to complete a survey to give us feedback on how the program has impacted them. We certainly will have professional development, professional learning days with the high school faculty, where we're going to continue to grapple with this idea of what our high school will look like in the future, how we continue to evolve. We're being more intentional. This was our first year of implementation of Smart Futures. Smart Futures is a career software where students do inventories. It helps them to identify careers of interest. So we now have a full year's worth of data that we can collect on students in terms of where their interests lie, what pathways, what areas they're interested in, as well as possible careers. We're going to use that to help inform things. We'll continue to get information from the National Clearinghouse that comes every 6 months as students complete semesters in college to see how those trends are changing. And certainly if we do have a rebound in terms of college interest, we'll do things a little bit differently that trend continues downward and want to validate that. We have established the Renovation Advisory Committee. It met once last summer, and then it paused a little bit as we focused a little bit more on the intermediate school. We're going to bring that back and get that started again. There's a meeting scheduled in June with that committee of people to try to make an influence. And the last bullet point is a little bit of an announcement. We're also planning a community meeting for June 17th, where we'll talk a little bit about the high school, the needs of the high school, and have some opportunities for the community to experience some of the challenges that we're facing here and what we're talking about for the betterment of our school. So those are the key pieces there. The last slide is not directly related to this presentation, but I hope as you read the vision statement, it is really what we're trying to do with our high school in terms of how we reimagine it philosophically, how we change programming to help support our students, but then also how do we bring a building in place, a modern building that can help to address the needs of our students and support our teachers in implementing the best possible education for our children. Certainly happy to answer any questions you may have or anything that came up or references.
So as we shared, this is a process, some review here, but certainly then some of that reimagining work. Questions for Dr. Ellis?
I don't have a question. I just have a comment. Thank you, Dr. Ellis, for all those great examples of how education is changing and evolving and how our building and our facilities play a crucial role in how teachers can teach and support our students.
I just have a quick question. The community meeting, how are we getting the word out about that?
That would be a good question for Mrs. Foreman, but we were planning at some point, probably in early June, to push out specific invitations and or registration, because we do want to have an idea of how many students are coming or family and community members are coming so that we can plan an appropriate number of activities. So there will be a blast out in the community forums as well as social media to help invite everybody, I believe, in the beginning of June.
Every household within a 1-block radius of the high school should receive something in the mail as well.
Great, thank you. As we share this continued process, Dr. Ellis will continue to keep informed. We've got some work with our advisory committee this summer, of course, in our community meeting, so lots to share there. The next item that I have on my agenda this evening is a policy for first read. As we know, with the approval of the school resource officer, it is our next step to ensure that we get policy associated with school security. This is a new policy. The districts have not had a school resource officer. So we spent some time reviewing both the PSBA recommendations. Dr. Orfing spent some time reviewing that with other school districts and their policies. There's some questions that come up this evening. You can certainly ask them now, or you can communicate to either one of us so we can prepare those edits for our next read.
There are questions possible.
So that's a 3 under mine. Mr. Jennings.
So we're talking about new policies here. Does the district have a whistleblower policy in place?
Can you give me more clear definition of what you mean by a whistleblower?
The state has a whistleblower protection act. And can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So I've said in the past, I get calls from staff and employees and teachers, and I always pass them off to the charge supervisor, follow the protocol. But the common theme that I get from them is, well, I don't really have a pathway because I'm fearful of retribution. And I'm continuing to get those calls. So I did a search of other districts, and I saw Central just passed a Whistleblower Protection Act policy. And it's modeled after the state's Whistleblower Protection Act, which is geared towards public entities. So my question is, do we have one? It doesn't sound like we do, but what I'm asking...
I
Go ahead.
a basic search, and it's not coming.
Well, I have a copy of it right here.
A basic search of our policies,
okay.
and you do not have one for that
Got it.
basic search.
So, again, I'm just one board member, but I'm requesting that a draft of a policy be made for whistleblower protection. I don't know if anybody else on the board has any thoughts for it.
I would second that. I was working on the same thing as that.
It's good. We're thinking alike, Ken.
I agree.
Great. I'll leave you the policy here. Thank you.
And if I can mention, Dr. Krauser, that was something that came up at the Federal Programs Conference today. That is something that we would need for federal programs anyway. So excellent timing, Mr. Sanders. I just got that word today.
I'll tell you,
So we are.
Somebody say I'm a soothsayer.
Everybody's on the same page. Good play. Yeah, absolutely. It looks like they coded that as 353. So yeah, we'll investigate that.
Perfect.
And draft out. Thank you. Any additional questions for me? Well, sir, that concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Dr. Krauser. Which brings us to Mrs. Kendig. Mrs. Kendig, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening. Before you are several discussion items that we will be seeking approval for on the May 27th meeting. The first three items are new veterans exemption requests for the real estate property taxes. These are applications that they applied to the assessment office and have been approved by them, and just need your blessing as well. Item number 7284 is the 3-year agreement with a new benefit broker, AP Benefit Advisors, in the amount of $5,833 and change per month for the 3 years of the contract. Number 5 is the independent contractor agreement with Billings Bilingual LLC to provide translation services as needed at $72 per hour. Number 6 is a business associate agreement with York County Office of Children and Youth. And this is Every Student Succeeds Act letter, and this is something that we renew, I believe, on an annual basis for our children in foster care, and the transportation agreement between the two entities. Number 7 is the Language Instruction Educational Program Services Agreement with the Lincoln Intermediate IU-12 at a cost of $104 an hour. And that is a slight increase over last year, which was $98 per hour. Johnson Controls Plan Service Agreement. This is an agreement for service and software upgrades for our building automation system that runs our HVAC and other equipment. And that's for a total of $21,854, and that is an increase over last year. Number 9 is the musical agreement with Concord Theatricals for the licensing for the musical for next year at a cost of just under $3,900. And number 10 is Act 48 Program Services. This was brought to you earlier. They did, oh no, I'm wrong item, pardon me. Number 10 is an Act 48 Program Services with River Rock for the AEDY students. It is an increase of 1 seat over last year, and also an approximate 7% increase in seat costs for that program. And the amount is $464,165 for the total contract. And that would be for 15 students. Number 11 is the agreement with the Lancaster Lebanon IU13 to provide the leave tracking system. Again, this was brought to you, there were some amendments made based on the board's feedback at $1.75 per employee and an additional 50-cent savings on a program that the Act 168 tracking program. Before I move on to any of the other items, are there any questions of those contracts or items that I can answer for you? Yes.
72A4.
Yes.
Could you describe now or later whether that benefit broker agreement with AP, benefit advisors, is roughly comparable to what we used to get from AIA Alera?
Yes, I can. So it is, it comes out to $70,000 a year. AIA Alera was, I think, and this it's not quite apples to apples because this includes some pharmacy stuff where the pharmacy was priced out separately and Alera got some rebates and things like that that will not be in the agreement with AP advisors. But all in all, it was about $56.70 would have been next year with the pharmacy and the $58.20 per month the following year and $59.90 for the third year. They had a 3% escalation in each year. So while the first 2 years are slightly more, the last year was more expensive. So it's comparable when you factor in some of the other pieces that weren't easily parsed out because they were per script or things of that nature.
All right, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Kendi, River Rock Academy, I think you referenced. How much was that again?
$464,165. So it's approximately $31,000 per student.
That's what I was looking for.
It was a 7% increase over last year.
And we have 15 seats?
15 seats, yes.
Okay. How many students have we placed in that type of?
I'll have to defer to.
I can say about 15. So this is not just for alternative education for disrupted youth. That's what that particular piece of it is for.
Yeah.
This is for special education seats as well. So this is mostly emotional support services for students whose needs cannot be met in programming here at the district. And as well as 3 of those seats are secondary seats for AEDY students. We typically have 1 to 2 there with occasional 3.
Right.
But River Rock does allow us to flex those seats. So if we have a special education student, rather than an AEDY student, we can use that prepaid seat for either. This went up 1 seat. Dr. Campbell did say she had 1 extra elementary student that she will be placing there that's currently there actually due to needs.
Just to be clear, that area of our educational need is growing.
Correct.
Trending more from our $15,000 a year, I'm using round numbers now, towards that $31,000 number.
Yes, and I know Dr. Campbell is looking at the needs of those programs and what services we want to make adjustments. I know she's looking at some adjustments at the high school specifically.
Yeah.
To add a supplemental, we have 2 teachers there and kind of splitting their services so we can maybe provide some different level of student services here on campus for our high school students that maybe will help.
So at that level, we are required as a school to pay those fees.
We are required to provide services for the students, whether or not we do that in-house or somewhere else based on their needs for program available.
But there's a larger
Is that
percentage
just?
of our population that is moving towards higher need.
In the high school and the middle school specifically, our younger
Sure.
grades are actually going down a little bit. So that's the hope over time that that's where we'll be. But I know Dr. Campbell is really looking at this emotional support continuum of services K-12.
The needs of our younger kids are going down, you're saying?
In the emotional support, our numbers have been going down. The increases have been more on the older end of our spectrum.
Okay. But overall, the increase is high.
In emotional support, correct.
Just in emotional support, but the $31,000 tuition payment, again, a higher percentage of students are trending in that direction. Okay. Just wanted to be clear on that. Thank you.
Any other questions before I move on? All right, thank you. Mrs. Potts, would you mind pulling up the 25-26 food service budget for me, please, just so that everyone can see it? So we will also be asking the board to approve the 25-26 food service budget. I can say that there are no, we will not be requesting any increases in the meal prices for this year. We'll be holding them at what they were last year. But we're looking at total revenues for the program of just over 2.3 million, which is almost a 5% increase in total revenues, and expenditures just under 2.4 million, 2,387,000, which is a 5% increase in expenditures. That shows a loss actually of 36,000. However, we do get a guarantee from our food service company of $100,000. So that would be a net change in position of 64,000 for the year. And we do have a relatively healthy fund balance. This program we're looking to, we've been working, I can't really say we, I'm going to give all the credit to Mrs. Fry and Megan. They've been working really closely with our food service program to increase participation by bringing in some new food items, shaking up the menu, and trying to engage our students to partake in our food and taste testing. So yes, so we're banking, or not banking, we're hoping to be able to increase those meal participation for next year. Any questions?
Yep. So we got about $2.4 million that's sitting there every year. It's not changing. Have you given any thought to how we could creatively use these funds?
Yes,
like
I
I've asked in
yes,
many past.
Yes, I have.
What are your thoughts?
So we will, you're only allowed to use that on food service items. So the plan would be in any of our renovation projects or anything where that's involved would be to use some of this money to help purchase any new equipment that would be needed in a new build or in a renovation project. We are also going to be buying some equipment this year to replace some aging equipment, not anywhere to the tune of 2.4 million, but we will be using it to replace some of that equipment.
Could it be used for AV equipment in a cafeteria?
No.
No.
Because it must be used on food service. We can't even buy
What if you're displaying menus?
If we're displaying menus, TVs, I'd have to check with PDE. They're pretty strict. They're very strict on what you can and can't use. You must get all of your purchases 5,000 greater approved by PDE. And I just talked to a colleague who they wanted to replace all the cafeteria tables, and they were only allowed to put like 20%, charge 20% to food service.
Okay. So what other ways are you looking to work down this budget?
Well, a large portion would be if and when we tackle the high school, would be to utilize it for the kitchen equipment here that is old. I have not gotten into the equipment at some of our other elementary buildings, but mostly it needs to be used on equipment.
Okay. All right, well, I look forward to hearing a report on that.
Sure.
Thanks.
So we're going to jump into the general fund final budget discussion. Again, I'll be asking the board to approve the final budget at our next planning meeting. First, we're going to take a look at the financial forecast as of March. We looked at this at the end of February. We'll just see the updated numbers. Then we'll move into the general fund budget and then some projections and fund balance. What you see here is the farthest column there on your left is prior year to date at the end of March, and then we look at current year to date, so you can see we're doing well compared to last year if you want to compare it that way. Our revenue is at 87% of budget, so way over on the far the column next to variance, that's our budget for this year, so we're at 87% of budget for revenues and at 67% of budget for expenditures. That middle column forecasts additional revenue and expenditures based on past history and where we think we're going to fall out. And then you have the 24-25 forecast that shows that we're expecting to just about break even. And that's maybe a little bit conservative on the revenue side, but the expenses were trending a little bit higher this month, which brought that down a little bit. But you can see, even compared to budget, that we are planning to finish better than we had originally forecasted at the budget time for 24-25 last year. As we look at the budget, so the first orange column on the left is your budget numbers. The black column is 24-25 budget in comparison. Total revenues are going to be are at 75 million, which is a 4.2 increase over last year. Total expenditures are 76.8 million, which is a 4.6 increase over last year. There is budgeted fund balance to be utilized to help offset some equipment purchases. And then there was the $500,000 budgetary reserve, which is on that $8 million line, the bottom line in expenses. And that's just offset with budgetary reserve fund balance. And that is to offset any unexpected expenses that may hit the budget. And so it does have a net change of a negative $914,000, excuse me. So how did that change from what you saw last month? It really didn't change a whole lot. There was a lot more going on behind, but in the net, it really didn't change much. On the revenue side, revenues did go up 22,000, and that was a decrease in real estate and an increase in state property tax reduction subsidy. So what we gave out, what decreased the real estate revenue on the local side was increased on the state side, so it's pretty much a wash. The real change came in adding and taking away some access and IDEA revenue. So access is medical billing revenue we get from IU12. That was not in the budget, but we do receive that, so I did add that. And then IDEA, based on what we're getting this year and what I'm hearing, some of that has been reduced, so I made a reduction there. But overall, it was a $22,000 increase in revenues. On the expenditure side, I did make some additional changes on the wages to account for some column movement and some benefits quotes that came in. And then there were some quotes that came in for some purchase services that we're looking at next year, and we were able to make some reductions, but overall it was a reduction of $17,000 in expenses for an overall favorable change of $40,000 to the bottom line. So in this budget is a 3.25% millage increase for this tax year. The collection rate is set at 96.89. That is down slightly. We talked about this last month. It factors in the discounts and penalties that weren't factored in before. There are increases on the earned income tax, transfer tax, and delinquent collections, and that's based on our collection of percentage increase I saw over last year and the trends that I've been seeing. So we did make increases in those revenues. There is $1 million budgeted in interest right now, and as we spoke about that before, 500 is included in a transfer, and then 500 is to net out revenue. Basic ed and special ed subsidies, are reflected in the amounts that were in the governor's proposal because we have no information currently about where we're going, where the state's going to end up. So I used what was in the governor's budget. What is not in the budget is the adequacy funding or the cyber subsidy. In the governor's budget, you did not include a cyber subsidy, which we got this year, as well as the adequacy funding. There's a lot of talk behind that funding. The adequacy funding only hits about 300 in some of the 500 schools, so there's been a push from some advocacy groups to take the funding that was pledged to go into adequacy and push it through the basic ed funding formula. And depending on which formula, if it goes out through advocacy or if it goes through basic ed, would change the amount that our district would get. And since we don't even know how much they're talking about, I didn't feel confident in what amount I could include in the budget, so I did not include that. And the hope from my perspective is that this lack of cyber subsidy will actually drive real change for cyber reform on the expenditure side, which is where I believe the efforts should be placed, and where we would see the most relief. And then on the title funds, it is based on the 24-25 allocations, and just today at the conference, Dr. Lorfing told me that the state got their allocation amounts, they haven't pushed them out into what the schools are gonna get. And some are down, some are up, but basically they're flat funded, so I believe that this number will be a good number for next year. On the expense side, wages are up about 2% from last year's budget, and this is based on actual positions and actual placement of teachers on this at scale and everybody on the contracts that they fall under. Benefits are up about almost 5%. This is also based on wage projections and the district benefits. Equipment includes approximately $243,000 of athletic and facility needs offset by the fund balance. And then again, there's a $500,000 transfer to capital reserve based on the interest revenue, and then $500,000 of budgetary reserve to protect against unplanned expenditures, and that is offset by fund balance. The homestead farmstead, this is new information. We got our allocation at the beginning of May. It did increase by about $150,000. As you can see there, the left is what we received last year, and the gray box is what we received this year. It is an increase in the deduction of $36.03. So last year, those who qualified received $191.52 off their tax bill, and this year they will see a $227.55 deduction. So for a sample home assessed at $165,000, based on the 3.25% tax increase, that's a real estate tax increase of $142.56. With the additional homestead reduction of $36.03, it would leave a net increase of $106 and change. As we look at just some projecting out a couple of years, and I've kind of told the board I'm not a big fan of projections. They paint a very negative picture, and as we've looked at our history usually doesn't play out to this, but we put them together to kind of look. As you can see in years 27 and that's 26, 27, and 27, 28. In those years, the revenues are down, and that's mostly due to lack of information from where the state's going to go. There is a tax increase in each of those local revenues. I did also account for a 2% EIT increase, as well as some increases in some of our major local revenues to account for those. I did do flat federal funding because that's where we've been the last couple of years, and I don't see any reason to make increases or decreases in that line item. On the state side, I did account for some increases in the subsidy we get for increased wages. I did put in a small increase for basic ed, but without any understanding of where the state's headed that direction, I didn't, which is why they're at only under 3%, where typically we're seeing a 4% increase when we finalize the budget. On the expenditure side, I did account for about a 3% flat increase in wages across the board, and then about a 10% increase in benefits, which is industry standard. We've been meeting that, so that might be a little bit aggressive on the expenditure side. And then some increases on the purchase services, which would be transportation and all of the outside placements that we have. And so there you see more of a likely trend in the expenditures of just under 5%. However, you do see in those outlying years large deficits.
Question on that.
Mm-hmm.
Is increased debt service from bond offerings from the building projects included in the other expenditures?
Yes.
So any anticipated bond offerings moving forward are sitting in those numbers?
Based on some of the projections, based on the projections that we had been going off of a while back, yes, the debt service schedules are in there.
Okay, so everything we're going to hear about, I guess, from Mr. Wentz, or I see our fine friends from Raymond James, that's in those numbers, correct?
We will be getting updated. I have not included those because I don't have all of that information.
So is that number going higher with what we're getting updated?
It may go up a little bit.
Okay, so
and I will revisit those when I have additional new numbers, but those numbers could go up. I don't see them going up significantly though, because I did account for some of that.
Thanks.
For the current budget, we have 1.3 in deficit, but we're actually at 21,000. So that's a 1.3 million swing in just the current budget.
Which is what I wanted to illustrate in this slide here. So this is actually a history of where we were and how we've actually performed versus how we were projecting to perform. So in 2021, there was a deficit, but I believe that it was a smaller deficit than had been projected. But as you can see there, those years, the district did perform better than had been projected. And sometimes it's more easily seen in a picture. So this is a graph of those projections. There's a lot going on here, so I'll try to explain it. But I've looked at projections 3 years out, 2 years out, 1 year out, current budget, and then the actual variance. So from right to left is 3, 2, 1, current. That light blue line, those large lines, that's your 3-year projections of that year that it's over. So you can see there are large swings. Does that mean we need to maybe get better at our projections? Maybe. But what you can see is we do typically outperform those projections.
Can you go back a slide, please? So just so I'm clear with the public here, 22, 23, 24 federal funds, those are ESSER funds that are sitting in there, because you swung
Yes.
from 770 to 2.3
Yes, those are
million,
ESSER.
1.3 million, so those are one-time
Correct, one-time funds.
contributions. If we didn't have those funds, those numbers would be.
A lot of those funds were also additional expenditures that you don't have as well. There was an HVAC project that was, I believe, a good portion of was $1 to $2 million.
So we would not have done the HVAC project if we didn't have the ESSER funds?
I don't know, I was not here during those discussions.
I just want to be transparent with
Right.
what those funds are.
They-
We would have been seriously negative without the ESSER funds in there, or we would have been making different decisions on things like an HVAC project at that point in time. Because we got the one-time contributions, I don't think that's a fair representation of what our underlying operating budget was doing at that point in time. You've got about $5 million sitting in there that's one-time in nature. And I get that you're talking about the expenditures, but the expenditures wouldn't have been done, or they would have been significantly different under that scenario.
Granted, yes, but I don't think, if I would take history prior to pre-COVID, I think the numbers played out the same as well. I did not go back that far, but I've looked at those, and we weren't having those huge deficits either.
Well, and then that should help you with your projections. We're a pretty consistent district, and I don't know why you're resistant or hesitant to show us projections. I mean, 75% of our costs are labor costs, and that's under contract, so you know what that is. You can kind of understand what you know what your overhead is. You can ballpark that because we're pretty consistent. You know what our federal funds are, so you could probably back into an implied tax rate and do realistic projections over 3 to 5 years, especially with the prospect of now getting closer probably to a $130 million building project, which every nonprofit board that I've ever sat on, every land development project I've ever been involved with, does that for scenario modeling to determine what the best expenditures are. So that's my suggestion. But anyway, what do I know? I only do it for a living.
And so then we're going to take a look at the assigned and unassigned fund balance. And so in the actual 23-24, that's where we ended the year. The 24-25 is a forecast of where we're going to end. And then the projected factors in the current budget that has been presented to you this evening. Are there any other questions regarding what was presented to you this evening?
I just had a question about the budgetary reserve. So we had 200,000 before, and we've got 500,000 now. I'm just curious what the thought process was.
A lot of school districts do 1% of their budget. That seemed like a big jump to go from 200,000 to 1% of our budget. So I thought 500,000 was a significant amount in case there's a significant issue. But in my 15 years, I've never dipped into budgetary reserve in any of the budgets that I've ever put it in. So
And we
It's,
have,
it's an in and out, so it doesn't impact, it doesn't push to show that you need a tax increase. It's a,
we're putting 300,000 more in than last year.
correct.
I have a question about the PACERS contribution. I see that it went down about 425,000 from the actual 23, 24, and forecasted to just 1 million flat.
Which one are you?
It's the second to last slide. It's an the assigned and unassigned fund balance.
Oh, sorry. Yes, so, I moved some of that around to different, areas. The, many years ago, when the PACERS rate was like at 4%, and then it jumped to 8%, and it was taking these large jumps, it was quite a bit of, added expenditures every year, and it was a recommendation that school districts create an assigned fund to help bridge those jumps in case they couldn't fund it within a general fund budget or a tax increase. And so a lot of schools have money, but they've not used that. Now our PACERS rate is more sustainable. It's at 35%, which is a large dollar amount, but the increases are very minor. It goes up 1/10%, 0.5%. It's not jumping 3 and 4% every year. So there are better ways to possibly utilize that fund, those funds, excuse me.
Thank you for the explanation.
Okay. And along with the budget, there will be the tax resolution, which just is the board authorizing the tax levy. And last year I did have a question about the other two taxes that are in that levy. They are taxes that are just a part and have always been a part. It's the real estate taxes and the transfer taxes. The district does get 0.5%. The municipalities gets the other half. They are not new taxes that the district has imposed. And then the homestead farmstead resolution, which is just authorizing the distribution of the $1.1 million that we received in the way that I had suggested there, and it just states that it will equate to $227.55 deduction on all approved homesteads and farmsteads. We do have 517 homesteads and 1 farmstead. And so finally, I do have, we have the Act 34 booklet, which you all received earlier today, or packet, I should say. We do have our experts here from Crabtree Rohrbach and from Raymond James. If there are any questions in regards to that booklet, there were a few changes in it, but significant changes, I don't believe so. If there's any questions, we'd be happy to answer those. We will be seeking approval of the booklet at the next meeting. Dr. Crowder, is there anything I missed on that?
No, I know it was just provided early this afternoon. Again, not major changes. If there's anything that jumped out, you can certainly share it tonight. And I know Mr. Wines kind of shared that timeline of where we were during our last meeting. If there's any questions that we can address this evening or we can address between now and then. There was a few grammatical errors that I think there was an and instead of an and that we caught earlier, but and an email address that has changed, and we addressed those.
Okay. Mrs. Koenig, thank you very much.
Thank you.
For all of your hard work. This brings us to item 8. Dr. Lorfing, the floor is yours.
We have a memorandum of understanding tonight for consideration. Will be at our next board meeting to change the coaching structure for high school cross country. This was brought to our attention after some changes in personnel for cross country, and this will bring boys cross country and girls cross country, which are currently separate, into a multi-sport teams similar to swimming, golf, track and field. So this is just a restructure, and since those positions are outlined in the YSCA negotiated agreement, we have an MOU for your consideration and a vote at the next meeting. Any questions?
Did you cover 8.2 as well?
Oh, yeah, sorry, 8.2 is mine as well, yes. So 8.2 is the language for an authorization for us as the administration to employ personnel positions that were previously approved. So these are positions that are already in the contract, already in the budget for next year. These are replacement positions, not any new positions, that we can go ahead and hire those individuals over the summer without needing to wait until the next board meeting. Those individuals would come up in front of the board for approval at the next board meeting officially. It would keep the board in the know of what is happening as far as personnel, like we always do. This way we can hire people over the summer and we can get those 60-day clocks ticking to make sure that we get people here in time for the start of the school year. Any questions on that?
Thank you. Any questions for Dr. Lord on 8.2? Hearing none? Okay. Item 8.3, Mrs. Kendi, we're back to you.
Yes, thank you. So in May, we typically appoint, well, we don't typically, we need to appoint our board treasurer. I did have a conversation with Mr. Desai, and he has indicated that he would be interested in serving as the treasurer for the 25-26 school year. And so next month, we would be looking to reappoint Mr. Desai in that position.
Very good. Any questions on that item? No. Thank you, Mr. Desai. Item 9.0, 9.1, seeking approval of the following consent items. The consent agenda items are listed below. Would any board member like any of these items considered separately, or are there any questions on any of these items? If not, I ask that a motion be made to approve the below mentioned items.
Second.
Thank you very much. We need a roll call vote for approval of the minutes and approval of the personnel report.
Mr. Desai.
Yes.
Mrs. Frybrick.
Yes.
Dr. Hessen.
Yes.
Mr. Robinson.
Yes.
Mr. Sanders.
Yes.
Mrs. San Martin.
Yes.
Dr. Sullivan. Mrs. Turner.
Yes.
The items pass 8-0.
Thank you very much. And now I am to pause here for Dr. Lorfink to recognize personnel guests.
Thank you so much. We have several of our new staff members that were just approved. Thank you to our board to start for the next school year. But I start with introducing Mrs. Felicia Rodrigo. If she is here. There she is. She's coming. Come on, come on. Mrs. Rodrigo is currently an IU employee. She's had multiple capacities over her time at the IU, and we had the pleasure of meeting with her. She was working with our staff here at the high school, so when we had a special education opening, she jumped at the chance to join York Sparb, and we're excited to have her join our high school back next year. The next person I would like to introduce is Mr. Matthew Johnson. Mr. Johnson, if you want to come up and say hello, you're welcome to. Mr. Johnson is going to be our new counselor at Yorkshire Elementary School. We're excited.
I'll keep this quick. I'm not good with microphones. I just want to say thank you for the opportunity, and I won't let you guys down. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. It's good to have you with us.
And I should warn Mr. Johnson, you're going to have to get comfortable with the microphone with all those kids over Yorkshire, all the assemblies. This is all Brian's going to get you on the microphone. And our last person I would like to introduce is Mrs. Megan Mace. She's going to be a teacher with us. She's bringing several years of experience, multiple years, over a decade, I believe, with experience with us. Mrs. Mace is going to be teaching first grade with us, also at Yorkshire Elementary School.
Hi everyone, I just want to say I'm thankful for the opportunity to be a part of York Suburban and Yorkshire Elementary. I'm excited to learn from my new teammates and bring my years of experience to share some ideas. And my parents graduated from Suburban in 73 and 74. So they're delighted that I'm now going to be a part of the school district. Thank you again.
Nothing like keeping it in the family.
And that's all I have this evening, Mr. Robinson. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lorfink. Now we come to section 10, informational items. 10.1, Lincoln Intermediate Unit, Mrs. Rucker.
Yes, you have available to you the board meeting highlights from the May 6th meeting of the LIU. Always interesting to see the comings and goings out there. And that concludes that report. My next one for York Adams Academy, you also have our board meeting highlights from April 29th. We have finished testing any students interested in coming to York Adams Academy since we are getting ready for graduation there on the 29th. And it looks like we will have a record number of graduates for this year, well over 150 graduates for this year, considering January and the upcoming graduation on the 29th, which you are all invited at 7 o'clock over the Learning Center. That concludes that report. And the only other thing I have is that the Joint Operating Committee will meet later this week, Wednesday evening, for our quarterly meeting. Get some updates on where things are going with that building and the facilities that may be here for. Any questions? That concludes my reports. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Fryer. Legislative update, I'll recognize myself. Well, it's been a busy week in Harrisburg. The Senate Education Committee reported out of committee SB 10, a voucher program by any other name, SB 127, Holocaust Education Bill for the study of the Holocaust and issues related to genocide. I think this is especially appropriate and apt since 80 years ago, around this time, concentration camps all over Western Germany were being liberated by our troops. SB 246, notification of parents when a weapons violation occurs on school grounds or at school events. SB 700, calling for or requiring evidence-based reading programs. The House Education Committee passed HB 17, instruction on cursive writing, a bill near and dear to my heart. HB 191, requiring automated defibrillation devices at school buildings and events. HB 1401 through 1407, reported out of committee this very morning. All of these bills are aimed at trying to address the current and pending teacher shortage in Pennsylvania. And, not related to either House or Senate committees, Representative Joe Cirisi introduced HB 1326. HB 1326 is the House Education Committee. I'm sorry, I can't read my own writing. That is updating transportation reporting requirements. But Joe Cirisi did try to push HB 1372, capping regular cyber tuition funding at $8,000 per student, regular student tuition. I'm also happy to report that Advocacy Day is taking place tomorrow in Harrisburg, and York Suburban will be showing the flag. I will be attending along with Mrs. Ashley Turner. Mrs. Ashley Turner showed her wisdom when she insisted that she drive to and from the event. Now, getting back to cyber charter reform, for those of you who are not glued to your live streams, two really informative and instructive hearings took place within the past several weeks. On May 2nd in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, and on May 8th in Stroudsburg, at which point the House Education Committee met at those two school districts and discussed various and sundry issues with a number of folks from that specific region. One of the most intriguing was in Johnstown when Mr. Rob Gleason, former state chair of the Republican Party, testified his heartfelt feelings about the need for cyber charter programs. Initially, he said, "We don't, period." I think he's a clear-thinking guy, but then he tempered his remarks later and said, well, maybe we need some of them. He backed off a little bit. But for those of you who know Mr. Gleason, he has been a strong and fierce advocate of cyber charter reform because he believes strongly that public schools are, one, under attack, and two, can deliver cyber education more effectively and more efficiently because of the support services and the monitoring measures that public schools have for students who choose a virtual education. At Stroudsburg, Maura McInerney of the Pennsylvania Education Law Center pretty much seconded Mr. Gleason's remarks and basically was saying the same thing, that public education, public schools, by and large, do a better job. And what I found most intriguing was the ideas that emerged from this hearing, that cyber education and charter education, well, cyber education particularly, is really an unfunded mandate from the state. 500 school districts in this state have no control over cyber charter programs. They don't set the rates, we don't set the rates, we don't monitor students. Basically, what we do, by direction of the legislature, is pay the bill. And there is a great deal of buzz, I think, in Harrisburg, on both sides of the aisle, especially in light of the Auditor General's report that points out the anomalies in the way tuitions are set. And I'll repeat this, I know I've said this before. Think of yourself as going to buy a car. And the salesman comes up and he convinces you to buy the new Belchfire 8. And then he asks where you live. And if you say, I live in Springersbury Township, he sets a certain rate of $36,000. But if you say you live in Red Lion, he'll set the rate of $22,000. Now, it sounds like a bit of an exaggeration, but it's really close enough for the way it actually works up in Harrisburg. And if anybody is really interested, these hearings can be viewed on the live stream under the House Education Committee section. It's 3 spine-tingling hours per hearing. If you're suffering from insomnia, it can also be a helpful sleep aid. If there are no questions, that concludes my report. No questions? Okay. York Adams Tax Bureau, Mrs. Kendick.
I have no report this evening.
And since Mrs. Schroeder is not here, we will table the York County School of Technology to next meeting. I'd like to recognize, yes ma'am.
I actually attended that meeting as the alternate, and the board report is attached. I highlighted some of the happenings in our last board meeting, but I just want to recognize that on May 22nd at 5 p.m., the New York Fairgrounds will be their commencement, and their last day of school is the day before, on May 21st.
Thank you very much, Mrs. San Martin. You saved me from profound embarrassment. Which brings us to recognition of visitors. Thank you all for coming. We appreciate your patience. Now, we come to the second opportunity for public comment. This public comment period is an opportunity to be heard by the board on agenda items or other items which may reasonably come before the board. Comments are to be directed to the entire board, not one individual board member, administration, staff member, or the audience. Comments will be timed and limited to 3 minutes or less. Please note, board and staff members will not normally respond to comments or questions during the meeting. When you hear your name called, please come forward. You do not need to state your name or address before sharing your remarks. First on the hit parade, Mr. Steve Mayer, Springersbury Township.
Good evening, thank you. There was some discussion last meeting about Project 2025, exactly what it is, and that sent me back in time to review it. I didn't read it in its entirety, it's 920 pages, but I did review some of the high points that pertain to education. Project 2025 is the Heritage Foundation's political agenda, and it calls for the following, among other things.
Is this an agenda item, please?
Yes, ma'am, it was, I believe it was the last meeting we heard about
Well,
this.
is it an agenda
Number
item
one,
when this
dismantle the Department of Education and gut public school funding.
Pardon me, we have order here.
Yes, I would like a ruling on this from the solicitor.
Number one, it's not for the public to call for a ruling, but Mr. President, if you want me to provide a ruling, I'll provide a gentle nudge to the individual like I have before to indicate that the comment needs to be about something that is or would come before this board as an item for action or deliberation. So if you can get your comments into something this board should be discussing, that's what we would want to hear.
Is that possible, sir?
I believe so. If these, if I may continue.
Yes, please.
Dismantle the Department of Education, gut public school funding, eliminate food and other programs for children in poverty, including Head Start, rescind civil rights protections for minority and LGBTQ students, which potentially can demonize and isolate them, prioritize faith-based programs and open up more religion in classrooms, impose policies that can incentivize book bans, promote vouchers which will redirect public funds to private and religious schools.
I respect this because this is not an agenda item. This is not, there's no actionable item on here. Ms. Solicitor, please.
This,
I'm asking, Mr. President, I'm imploring you to ask him to get to the point about what's an agenda item here, or you define what the agenda item is, please.
I just indicated to Mr. Sanders that I would give this gentleman the same opportunity I gave other people, which is about a minute to kind of get to their point, which we're getting there. And if he can tie it to something to come before this board, this is his introduction, just like we've given other people that opportunity. But it does need to get to something this board would discuss, deliberate, or act on.
Mr. Ferrier, if you can get to the point that would be pertinent to the board.
I believe I can. Some of the goals which I listed are already being enacted in nearby districts. With an election coming up, we need to be aware which candidates intend to endorse or support Project 2025 if they get elected to the board.
Stop it right now.
That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Disgraceful.
Mr. Jim Polanski, Springersbury Township. Good evening.
Good evening, sir, and board members. Tonight I want to speak about test scores. As a student many years ago, taking tests was an assessment tool for learning. I don't know anyone who enjoyed taking tests and few enjoyed seeing the score they were given. As someone who has taught children and adults for nearly 30 years, I can say that it can be difficult from the perspective of a teacher as well. One wants to be fair and objective and yet not have the students feel shame and believe they are a failure, even if turning in a failing piece of work. The grade is for the work they completed and not a classification of whether they are a failure. It is not always seen in that way. There is pressure to perform, even though the measurable assessments are limited with any test. Even a broader test like the SAT does not measure one's social skills, one's compassion, one's dedication, one's curiosity, one's passion, one's character. I witnessed many students with these skills and more when I recently led an event at Suburban's Minithon. The same could be said for our teachers and administrators. Assessing our teachers or school district by test scores alone is simply a way to disregard and devalue the person. I recently saw one of my daughter's former teachers. My daughter graduated in 2017. She remembered my daughter's name and my wife and me as her parents. She never mentioned my daughter's grade point average or test scores or class rank. She saw a student as more than test scores. While tests can be an assessment tool, they are far, far from seeing the complete person and their gifts and abilities. I'm grateful for people who see more than a high or low test score and make a generalization about the students, the teachers, or the administration. We all have known friends and family who don't test well, but have gone on to successful, fulfilling careers and have made significant contributions to their community. Teaching is more than information being transferred into another person and being recorded on some test. It is about seeing the totality of the other person and helping them achieve their purpose in life for the betterment of our entire society. I see that here at York Suburban, and I hope others are able to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah Reinecker, Spring Garden Township. Passes. Andy Ruth, Spring Garden Township.
I'll pass, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Chris Sanders, Springer's Ferry Township.
I think I'm going to pass. I think I've said enough.
Thank you, ma'am. Kathy Schaefer, Spring Garden Township.
Good evening. Given the first public comment in the first session, it seems that we now have an extra copy of said book since in March, I believe Mrs. Turner reported that she had donated one as well, so how fortunate the district is to have multiple copies now. With respect to building projects, I recently heard the phrase, nostalgia is our biggest enemy, or another one is nostalgia is the enemy of progress. It implies that looking back can prevent us from embracing new ideas and opportunities. So I found this intriguing. And so I did, like many people do when they're intrigued, I Googled it. And so here are the things that I found why this sentiment is often expressed. Number one, an idealized past. Nostalgia often creates a false sense of the past where problems and difficulties are minimized or forgotten. This can make it difficult to see the need for change or improvement in the present. Number two, resistance to change. A strong attachment to the past can make people resistant to new ideas, technologies, or social norms. They may prefer the familiar and resist what they perceive as disruption or uncertainty. Number three, focus on the past. When people are overly focused on the past, they may not be fully engaged in the present or looking towards the future. This can limit their potential for growth and innovation. Number four, stifling innovation. A focus on the past can prevent us from exploring new possibilities and developing innovative solutions. We may be more likely to cling to old ways of doing things rather than seeking out new approaches. Number five, social and political implications. In a social or political context, nostalgia can be used to justify maintaining the status quo or opposing social change. So that was my Google search, but in closing, I'd just like to say that I recognize and appreciate the nostalgic perspectives. That aside, it's important for all of us to recognize the school board directors and what their role is, and that's to focus on the future for York Suburban and the community as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the second round of public comment, which brings us to item 13.0, board comments, more popularly known as for the good of the order. Would any board member like to make a comment? No? Okay. Going once, twice, three times? We're adjourned. Thank you.